Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
So when I became a minister, our class, Reverend Michael told us that there's no difference between a minister and everybody else except for that a minister makes their spiritual life public. That's the only difference. Everyone's experiencing spirit, but part of my job is to talk about it every week. So I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, we're all supposed to be leaders of light, to shine our light, to not hide it. It's not just for ministers. So the very first talk I gave at Celebration Center, it was before I became their minister, but I knew that was where I was going to be a minister, just intuitively. So I gave this rip-roaring talk on leaders of light. Standing ovation, people loved it. I knew I was going to be a minister there. And years later, I was looking at my talk, and it didn't have quite the impact. I'm like, that was interesting that had such a big impact. But life has changed a lot since then. So much about being a leader. Even so when the topic that today came up, leaders of light, I didn't actually go, yay. I was like, that doesn't really excite me. Because what was happening back then, we didn't have the internet. And there was so much like speak your truth, share who you are, and that was a really powerful message back in 2000. But fast forward to now, or even to these last years since the internet, but everybody is talking. Everybody's speaking. Everyone is, as we've gone through difficult times, we were constantly being encouraged from the CSL leadership, speak to social justice, speak to this, and there was a few who were saying, you're not really a minister until you're speaking to social justice, because if you're about oneness, you need to be speaking about this. So there became this pressure. We all have to be talking and telling people who they are and if they're not doing it right. That's not what they would say, but that's what it felt like, because I am absolutely for equality for all people. And to me, that's just like a given. Of course I'm for that, but it wasn't my calling to talk about it. My calling, I would say, is our theme next year is living the life divine, and I would say that's what my life is about. But it gets challenging because there's all these memes. If you're staying silent, you're part of the problem, and so everything was direct at you. Here's the truth, and not even about that. So I want to do this Running Man thing, I'm actually paying for it. So I've actually signed up in September. So I got off Instagram, but I got back on just to follow Jesse Itzler, because he's one of the I wanted to follow him for the Running Man. And I guess because that's the only person I'm following, that and Running Man, every time I open Instagram, I get a ton of motivational videos. Everybody has 5 steps to this, 3 steps that you need to do this. Oh no, and you need to do this, and you need to. I'm like, when I first got on, I'm like, oh yeah, that's really good. And I sent it to myself to remind myself. But then every single video, and they're all telling different things. And you need to do this, and you need to do this. We have a world who everyone is telling everybody exactly what they need to do to be their best selves. And it's overwhelming if you even begin to look. Memes. We all have these, have you seen this meme? Have you seen this? And it's great stuff, sometimes quite contradictory, but still great stuff. But it's exhausting. And so I think that's part of why when I got this inner note thing to have December be leaders of light, I didn't go, yay, I felt constricted. I'm like, well, because then I went back and I actually have the outline from that talk, and I'm like, that doesn't move me at all. And so yesterday, as I was exploring a reading for it today, I found those 2 readings, and there was just so much. Jack knows I was like, because it's coming at it from a different place. It's not like the abrasive, aggressive Like, this is what you think, and this is what being a leader is. So what is being a leader? And that's a part of it. I don't mean to say that that's not important. One reason why I got on Instagram to follow Jesse Itzler is because this Running Man thing is so outside my comfort zone. I need as much motivational speaking as I can get around it. So I like that energy. But that's one person. I'm not watching 100 different people motivating me about every little thing in my life. Get up and do those dishes like you've never done those dishes before. We need both sides of that same coin. So leadership is directive, but we've gone so much in that perspective. We also have to do where it comes in sort of by the side, like who we are. We lead by who we are. When I was looking up leaders, just sort of different definitions, it said people who see things that they can improve upon and lead by moving in that direction. And all of us can do that, just in our quiet, own individual way. What is it that I need to improve on in my life? Because leadership, first and foremost, is done by example. And so as we're going into this month of December, it's a time to really be contemplative about where is my area of growth. When we lead, we want to lead with our heart, not just with our mind. We want to lead with that softness. And one of the things I loved about the Anam Cara reading today was because I had to stop and think about it, because we know so much of the healing of trauma is taking secrets out of the closet and facing them. And he was saying secrets are good, so I had to stop for a moment, take that in, and it's true. Because they're both true. There's always two sides of the same coin. When I go back to what Reverend Michael said about leading is sharing your own spiritual journey, a little piece of me died. And I never really consciously even made that awareness until recently. But I never talked about any of my spiritual experiences ever until I became a pulpit minister. Even with my first husband, who was a minister, never talked about him. Not because I thought he couldn't, it was so clearly a wall, because I loved the sacredness of the stillness, of the silence, that there's something so beautiful and rich in not telling what's going on. You know it, you feel it, and it grows, and it is nurtured. And so from the time I was little, I just knew I don't talk about those things. So it wasn't like, oh, should I tell him or shouldn't I tell him? I was in therapy for 4 years, never said a word. And so now, now you have to talk about it now that you're a minister. Well, it's taken me a lot of years to get there. When I first became a minister, I still wasn't talking about it. So it was like little gradual steps, and now I'm writing about it, talking about it, and it seems like I've been doing it for my whole life, but actually, it's only something new. And I do it because Reverend Michael told me I had to. But there is a sense of, I don't always want to do that, because it feels like it takes a little away something. So if you notice, most of the spiritual experiences I talk about are way in the past. Because I still want to cultivate that sacredness, and it's not to keep it secret in terms of you can't know, but to nurture it, to allow that spiritual life to continue to be nurtured inside of me as I'm moving through, as I'm growing spiritually. So I tend to talk about things that were a long time ago. And so as we're going through this beautiful month, I really do, December is my favorite month, because I just think it's so sacred. It's such a sacred time of listening. I've always said, and I'll say it, I know for those of you who've been coming, you've heard me say this every year at December, but I have to say it again for those of you who are new. The way I see December, it really starts October, Day of the Dead, Halloween, but I feel it so intensely in December. The veil is so thin. If we're really listening, that's the whole winter solstice. You're going into that deep inner stillness, and you're listening in the dark, the fertile soil of darkness. And there's so much to be learned and felt there. So the idea of pilgrimage is, most of you know, it's when you go to a place and you, like El Camino, you walk, you go to Sedona. If you're Muslim, you go to Mecca. Some people go to Jerusalem. There's places that you take pilgrimages. It's a spatial thing. And I've always loved, I took many years ago from a professor at Vanderbilt in the divinity school. She was talking about that the Jewish people, when they came up, so every tribe had their own origin stories. When the Israel people, Jewish people, came up with their story, they were in Babylon, they were in exile. So they had no place to center their origin story. So most origin stories are around a place, but they didn't have a place. So she said, and I haven't checked up on her work, but I trust her. She said it's one of the only origin stories that is around time rather than place. And so that's the 7-day journey of creation. It's in time. Doesn't call about any place. And so it was inspired by that I started doing this every December. We do a pilgrimage in time. We don't have to go anywhere. That between, and it so fits in with, for those of you who have a Christian background, with Advent. Can't speak to all the other traditions, because I'm not from them, but I'm always happy to learn. Just so you know, anyone has stuff to teach me, I'm here to learn. But I do know about Advent, but it's a time of listening. We know solstice, the earthbound shortest day of the year. We have a winter solstice ceremony, by the way. It's a time of such incredible listening, of preparing, of opening ourselves to hear something new, to hear something that we've never heard before. It's such an incredible time of pilgrimage. And so the invitation I have for all of us is to walk through this time of the month of December really listening, really paying attention to what that divine presence within us, around us, through us, as us, wants to reveal about where we are going in 2025, because we do have autonomy and agency in what we choose to do for next year. No one can control that. No one can control the divine presence. You can control a lot of things in the outer world, but they can't control the divine presence within us. And so to listen during this pilgrimage, and I invite us, and I'm keeping this too because I get a little nosy, and I'll often ask you. I'm going to do my best not to ask anyone. If you tell me, I'll be happy to hear, but to really give people their space. Because there's some people who are very comfortable sharing everything. I was just never one of those people. I like keeping it to myself. And so often, like, people say, well, why are you keeping it secret? I'm not trying to keep things secret like it's something special. I just find that it's the fertile soil of the darkness. That's what this time is about. It's a time to just sort of hunker in and or maybe you just have your intimate group that you tell your partner or your close friends or your siblings, someone. You might have other people you tell, but they're sacred. It's a sacred telling. You're not just telling it over coffee and tea, but you're really creating a sacred energy. If you're going to share it in sacredness, because if it's coming from the divine, it's meant to be held in that sacredness. So it's a time of December of listening and of being willing to be still with it and not have to advertise it to the world. You don't have to tell anyone your 5 steps to 2025. Being a leader can be very quiet. A leader leads by example. That's all you need. Leaders of light. I was thinking about this experience of light. We're not talking about sunlight, obviously, but the spiritual light. The interesting thing about light, at least for me, I can only speak for is I have no control over it. There's sometimes I experience it and sometimes I don't. I've had many spiritual experiences, not all of them have light. So I started looking at that, I was thinking, well, what, in terms of, not just like on the other side of the veil, when you pass on, you're going to be in light, but I mean here and now. And I started looking at, So one of my first experiences of light was when I was in 8th grade. My family moved to Chevy Chase, Maryland for 2 years. We knew we were only going to be there for 2 years, so I was willing to take risks because I knew even if nobody didn't like me, I was moving. Because I was still, introverted and shy, so I decided I was going to come out of my shell. I only had 2 years. I had to make the best of it. And so I remember praying with all my heart, lying on my bed. I didn't do the whole, I just sat the way I prayed was just lying on my bed talking. It was a very sophisticated form of prayer. Prayer from the heart. And I was just begging God. I'm like, because my mom always told me, if you want to make friends, you have to join activities. By the way, it's a good recipe for when you're part of a spiritual community. Join the activities. So I'm like, okay, well, I shot a lot of baskets in our driveway. So I used to do that a lot, but I had never seen basketball. I didn't really understand basketball at this point. This was in the late 70s. So I thought, well, I'll try out for the basketball team. Please let me make it. I know I don't know about basketball, but I want to make friends, and this is something I know how to shoot baskets. It's the one thing I know how to do. So I went to the tryouts the next day, and of course I didn't have any dribbling skills. I didn't understand anything that was happening, but I could shoot baskets. And at one point, they asked us to shoot 10 foul shots, and I made 8 out of 10 foul shots, which isn't unusual considering the amount of times, how much time I spent shooting baskets. However, it wasn't me shooting. As I was shooting, I was in all light. It was just golden light, just shooting and making baskets. And that had an impact on me because I'm like, oh, my prayer was heard. And I was being helped. And it wasn't like I said, I knew how to shoot baskets, but I could fall apart, you can miss shots, but it was like this thing was helping me. Years later, in my senior year in high school, we were volleyball team. We were ranked 3rd in the state of Ohio. And we were in a regional game, our team's falling apart, and I just moved into the zone. And so what the zone is you're no longer in your thinking mind. You're just moving from a presence. And you're one with everything, and you just know exactly what to do, when to do it, and it's just you're in the flow. You've all heard about being in the zone. You've done it in art, you've done it in music, you've done it with all your scientific experiments that I know you knew. But you've all experienced the zone, right? When you just get lost in something and you're immersed and it's moving through you. So that's what was happening, and it's a glorious feeling. Meditation gets you into that state. Meditation, they've really isolated, here's what's happening in the brain, and this is why blah, blah, blah. So we've really reduced meditation now into a biological brain function. That's a whole other story. But I didn't experience light. It was awesome. I loved the experience. I played great, but I didn't experience light. Happened again years later. I was playing with my brother in racquetball. I was practicing Zen at the time. I was reading Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, and just being present with my breath, not attached, not resisting, just letting the flow go. And man, I had the game of my life, but no light. So I was thinking about, well, what was different? The outcome was the same. I was doing well by letting go and letting the Spirit, but only in one of those experiences did I experience light. And what I recognize is in that experience of the one thing that was fundamentally different in my experience of it was with light, I felt presence. I felt that an otherness. And sometimes that's hard for us at a teaching where we keep saying there's only one power, one presence. How could there be an otherness? But in the otherness, there's also oneness. It's not either or, but both and. And I felt this presence of help that I had prayed the night before. It was responding, and I didn't feel alone. The other experiences were awesome, but I didn't feel a presence. I just felt like I had shifted into a different state of consciousness, and it was still cool, and it was still moving, but I didn't feel the presence of an otherness. And there was something that filled my soul with that light. And I started looking at the other experiences when I had light, and I'm like, oh, there's always this sense that there's something so much greater than me participating with me and in me. And just like he was saying, John Donahue, that it's not always direct, that severe light, the 1, 2, 3 of light. He made a comparison with hospitals, that white sterile light, or if you walk into anything where it's too bright and you're like this, you don't feel open, you feel shut down, but the soft candlelight softens and opens your heart. That's the kind of light I was thinking. In every one of these experiences, I'm not experiencing this overpowering, white, brilliant light. It was always kind of goldenish, yellowish. It was soft. It was inviting. It was loving. It was so far beyond me, and yet absolutely immersed in my experience. And I welcomed it in, even as it welcomed me into its life. So as we're going and thinking about leaders of light, it's not even, I'm going to be a light and I'm going to be just like again, it's personality too. I love people who are very out there, but it doesn't have to be that. All I'm saying is I don't want to ever get into the either or, because I love both. I absolutely love both. But in these days where there has been a lot of, it's really nice to know light in that soft way. It's really nice to know that there's this infinitely powerful light that sometimes you don't feel it at all. Then I was going back and looking at these different experiences, and even the different experiences, and they're all different, but I didn't always see light, but I felt the light. And that's even cooler. And then sometimes the light's just sort of off on the periphery. It's not like it's direct, I see light everywhere. It's just like, I feel this light presence here. Or I see a little light on the side of my eye. I remember I had someone in my community, cool dude, interesting with the time of we're in right now. This was back in Virginia. I was the minister at Celebration Center, which is in Falls Church, a suburb of DC. And he had once worked for years with the CIA, and they had him, he was a psychic. And so his job was to go, they had him travel all over the world with their team. And he sat in the room to tell the CIA operatives who was lying. And he says, I was on Air Force One. And his wife was a lobbyist, and she said she was so excited when she met him because she was going to really impress him with all the people she knew. And they're walking down Capitol Hill, and she's like, here's so-and-so. And they're all like, hey, Bob. How do you know all these people? Anyways, I just think it's really cool. And I wasn't totally sure until he passed on, and we had a memorial service, and then the people who came and shared things, I'm like, holy smokes, this was real. And if you ever see that movie, Staring at Goats, with George Clooney, has anyone heard of it, Staring at Goats? Yeah, it's kind of like that whole thing. It's real. Anyway, I got off track with telling the truth, the light, that there's so much going on, and we can pick up on it even without our own visible eyes. So he used to teach people in our community, because he also saw auras, and so he would teach people how to see energy that you can't see with your two eyes. And one of the ways, I remember him sharing this, one of the ways you see light is to not look directly at something, but to sort of soften your eyes and just look around somebody, like more look at their outline around them rather than right at them. And I'm like, that's the same type of light we're talking about here. This light, it's always there. I mean, so the spiritual principle, the forward-facing principle is light always exists. Right now we are swimming in this energy of light that's swirling around all of us, in, through, and as these chairs, these floors, the ceiling, on the computers, through all the world. It is constant. It doesn't come, it doesn't go. We are immersed in light. It is always there. And then we get these little breaks, these little openings. And the more we are soft with it, I find, the more we're soft in our heart, we start to see these moments. But it requires softness. It requires gentleness. So as we're going through this beautiful radiant month of December, and you're in the inquiry of what is yet to be, let it be a soft inquiry, not like, okay, I mean, in visioning, we do that. And what I've discovered is a lot of people get frustrated with visioning because, I don't get a vision. I hear that all the time. I don't get a vision. And as I've been preparing for this talk, I'm like, that's why, because we're so directive. Like, I need a vision, and I need it to come right through my third eye, and I got to see the whole thing. And versus, I'm just opening intuitively. So even if I don't get anything visually, I start to feel things just by asking the questions. That's why we started with Letters to a Young Poet. Just by asking the questions, it opens us up. I'm opening to the light that surrounds me, that supports me, that loves me, that cares about me. Passion, I don't mean me, us, all of us, every living creative form. And when we have the consciousness to ask and to listen, we're listening and asking with softness, with a gentleness and a humility and purity almost, but not a harsh purity, a soft one. And we start to feel into new ways of seeing and feeling that we didn't hear before. And it's not necessarily, in fact, I would say usually it's not a direct vision. It's more of that intuition. Ernest Holmes always has said, intuition is the way the divine speaks to us. But we have to listen. We have to hear those little moments. So I guess maybe because I'm visual it's light, but Yogananda and I know for Jack, a lot of it is sound. You hear things. So we have our five senses that we use more than others. It doesn't matter. Whatever your senses are, just be a little more soft and opening. As we're listening with our ears, we're listening with our eyes, listening with our heart, listening with our smell, listening with our taste, and listening with our intuition. And we hear that beautiful place in which we're going forward. And so one more thought. I was really trying to avoid 3 steps to being a leader of light. So it's just a thought crossed my mind. I've been recently inspired, and I love this because it goes so well with this idea that it's not always direct. It can be. So a lot of times, many of us have a quality that we pick or feel called to for the next year. I love this. And so with any quality, what I want us to be open to, the newness, is like, if let's say love. Love is such a generic term, though. What's new about love? Because that's what leaders do. They find something new for yourself, first and foremost. What's new about love that's calling me? What's new about joy or peace? So you can pick some of those big qualities and make it specific. And when I say pick, you're listening, following your heart, the intuition, the light, you're hearing the light, you're seeing the light, or just sensing the light. And I want also for all of us to be open to maybe words that you wouldn't find in angel cards, or you wouldn't find in basic qualities. And what inspired me about this was Reverend David Alt was sharing on Facebook that the word that's come for him for 2025 is environment. And that's just sort of, I'm like, wow, I've never heard that one before. I love it when uniqueness comes. And he said it's about being in an environment. What kind of environment does he want to be as he goes through the world? Isn't that cool? Like that immediately, like, oh, what kind of environment do I want to be? What environment am I creating every time I walk into a room? What environment do I want to be a part of, to participate, to put my energy into? What environments do I want to create? I mean, he didn't say all that, but that's what came to me. I mean, there's so much richness when you come up with something that maybe you've never thought of before. And it's hard to not go by past precedent. And that's why we have to listen. Because we have past precedent humanly, but spirit has no past precedent. Spirit is uninhibited, unlimited, infinite ways of seeing new things, but we can't catch it if we're not listening. And that's why this month is so sacred. It is so sacred because I love that I said December is my favorite year. Because in essence, what we're hearing is going to animate our entire year for 2025. If we really are listening and you feel it, it's going to animate your life next year. So it's really powerful. Are you with me on this? Leaders of light. We are all leaders of light. And let us be leaders that can walk into a room and lead, but also leaders who can be quietly in the corner and also lead in our quiet ways as well as in our directive ways. Let us be examples of light, sometimes overtly, but often just so subtly and quietly. Leaders of light. Let's pray. So wonderful just to be still for a minute. And to recognize that each and every one of us in this moment is surrounded and enfolded by a presence that we can never contain through any concept or words. And yet it's right here. And we let it in. We let it out and we let it in with every breath. It surrounds us and it folds us, it breathes us, it thinks us, it feels us. It is everything that we are. Is this radiant, infinite, oceanic light. This light that is in, through, and as all creation, creation that we call dark, creation that we call light, it transcends all of that. It is the most brilliant light in the world, and yet it is tender and soft, giving and supple, flexible. And so we allow all of those qualities, the infinite intelligence, the infinite radiant knowing, as well as that wonderful gentleness, suppleness, softness, tenderness. We let it all in as our very being right here and right now. We are that light, directly and indirectly, overtly and covertly, for all the world to see, and sacred and secret within our own soul. We are all of it right here and right now. And there's no place I'd rather be. And so I just give thanks. I give thanks knowing there's nothing else but this, and it is revealing itself perfectly, beautifully, tenderly, powerfully, creatively, uniquely, clearly, intuitively, as our very life, as our unique lives, each and every one of us. It is revealing to each and every one of us exactly what we need to hear and see and feel and intuit and get a sense of. And we hold that sacred, that as we move through every day of this month, we are willing to hold everything that's unfolding for us day by day by day in that sacred, secret place of our heart and soul. We let it get nurtured by the fecundity of stillness, of silence, of sacredness, of secretiveness. A secretiveness that is not destructive, but is life-giving. That is life-giving. This is where we are today, and it is holy, and it is awesome. It is beautiful, it is tender, and we welcome it. We welcome it. We welcome it. And in that welcoming, there's nothing else to say other than thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And knowing this light and this love is already done, as every one of us in this room, everyone online, everyone who's hearing, their prayers, wherever they are, it is done. And together we say, and so it is. Amen and amen.
I walk in God in all